Dr Shane Reti.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This bill is a very important piece of legislation for verifying who offenders and potential offenders might be, and then appropriately sharing that information. Now, identifying who someone is the process of authentication, and generally there are two factors to authentication. The first is something you have, example, a swipe card, a passport, or a cell phone, and then something you know, a PIN, a password, or a security question. And both of these factors come with problems. The something you know, well, a password can be hacked, it can be guessed, it can be stolen. The something you have can also be stolen, it can be copied, it can be falsely created, it can actually be legitimately created. And this feeds into what my colleague was just saying about aliases and identity theft, because name changing can be legitimately done and new identification documents established. Now, this leads me to talk about another Smith, because the focus here today has been around Philip John Smith, but I want to give the case of another Smith, Michael Richard Smith, who in 2015 was convicted of theft by a person in a special relationship and jailed for 5 years. Now, he changed his name and identification many times. He was also known as Michael Weaver, Michael Levitoff and Fresnel. And while he was on bail awaiting trial, he changed his name, set up new companies and continued to defraud innocent New Zealanders. So name changing is definitely a tool that offenders use. And again, to pick up my colleague here from the Greens, also suggesting that one case has generated this legislation, I'd point him to examples of fraudsters and criminals who have recently changed their names, and point him to Paul James Bennett, aka Paul John Williams. This is all just in 2014. Philip John Smith, who we know, Christian Dario Al-Qaeda, and Glenn Green, also known as Dallas DeAngelis. So there's actually quite a body of work and case law to substantiate this legislation. In fact, in 2012-2013, 7,422 New Zealanders changed their name. Now, of course, many did it legitimately, but some may have done it for illicit purposes as well. What this bill does then is allow biometric authentication. So we've got what we know and what we have. This adds what we are. That's the third factor that biometric authentication adds. I think it's very important to add to that tool set, and I believe that it will probably be a combination of all three, that'll be the most effective. Of course, the ultimate effective authentication is DNA, and at some time in the future, this bill future-proofs that possibility that DNA actually becomes our biometric assessment. Anyway, Mr Speaker, I think this is very good, very important legislation, and I commend this bill to the House.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those that are of that opinion will say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. The ayes have it. No. A party vote is called for. The clerk will conduct a party vote.
New Zealand National?
59 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour?
32 votes in favour.
Green Party?
14 votes opposed.
New Zealand First?
12 in favour.
Maori Party?
2 votes in favour.
Act New Zealand?
1 vote in favour.
United Future?
1 in favour.
The ayes are 107, the noes are 14. The ayes have it.
Enhancing Identity Verification and Border Processes Legislation Bill, first reading.
The question is that the Enhancing Identity Verification and Border Process Legislation Bill be considered by the Law and Order Committee. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary opinion will say no. The ayes have it. Call on Government Order of the Day number 2.